Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving into the 15th century communications revolution that absolutely changed the world forever. It's a massive story about how one single piece of technology completely rewired how humanity interacts, thinks, and governs itself.
So let's just kick things off by thinking about the screen you're looking at right now. Whether you're on a smartphone, a tablet, or a laptop, you literally have the entire world's knowledge right at your fingertips. And it feels entirely modern, doesn't it? Well, today we're exploring its 15th century equivalent, Johann Gutenberg's printing press. We're going to see how the absolute explosion of printed text back then perfectly mirrored the explosion of digital data we're all living through right now.
Okay, here's our quick roadmap for the Explainer. We'll start with the Renaissance Internet, move on to the rise of the humanists, check out Gutenberg's printing revolution, look at Erasmus as the first viral scholar, and finally dive into Machiavelli and Thomas More. Section 1. The Renaissance Internet. Let's set the stage and look at the world right before the press came along.
Imagine a world where the very concept of reading was basically a closely guarded secret. At the start of the 15th century, knowledge was incredibly scarce. Producing just one single book meant copying it by hand, which was painstakingly slow and just wildly expensive. Because of that, reading and writing were completely monopolized by a tiny, super-privileged global elite, mostly concentrated in major cities like Constantinople and Baghdad. You couldn't just open a web browser or stroll into a local library. You needed access to a very, very exclusive inner circle.
Section 2. The Rise of the Humanists. This was a totally new breed of scholars stepping onto the scene.
Now, as the world expanded and got more complex, these thinkers realized the old, rigid medieval ways just weren't cutting it anymore. But these humanists weren't your typical dusty academics hiding away in ivory towers. They were incredibly pragmatic. They figured that by digging up, translating, and really analyzing classical texts from ancient Greeks and Romans, they could find practical, everyday tools to navigate their own reality. Their whole goal was to mold cultured, highly articulate citizens who could step up and actively shape society.
To do this, they championed specific subjects, basically the stuff we call the humanities today: grammar, rhetoric, poetry, history, and more philosophy. And they didn't just teach these for the sake of art, right? They were providing highly practical skills. They were essentially running the premier training grounds for future diplomats, lawyers, and administrators. By mastering language and rhetoric, these students learned how to persuasively sell their ideas and themselves to ruling elites like kings and dukes. This huge demand for fresh, powerful ideas set the perfect stage for the next big leap. Section 3. Gutenberg's printing revolution. This is the machine that truly changed everything. Because, think about it, without a way to rapidly share these new humanist ideas, they would have just stayed trapped with a few rich people. Here we see the massive leap from the manuscript era to the print era. It's like night and day. Manuscripts were slow, crazy expensive luxury items, and honestly prone to a lot of copying errors. But with movable metal type, suddenly you have mass production, cheap, perfectly identical copies. Scholars who are hundreds of miles apart could finally debate the exact same text on the exact same page. It was an absolute earthquake for human knowledge.
If we look at this timeline, you can see how Johann Gutenberg, along with his backer Johann Fust and assistant Peter Schoeffer, turned a cool invention into a massive industry. They cracked the code for movable metal type in mines around 1450. By 1455, boom, they've printed a Latin Bible. And then the idea spread like wildfire. Within just 30 years, by 1480, you've got printing presses set up in literally every major European city.
And the scale of this is just mind-blowing. By the year 1500, those presses had churned out an estimated 6 to 15 million books across 40,000 different editions. Let that sink in for a second. In just 50 years, these machines produced more books than had been painstakingly hand-copied since the fall of the entire Roman Empire. This wasn't just an upgrade in production, it was a total transformation of what humanity could do.
And because they were printing so much, costs absolutely plummeted. We're talking printed pamphlets becoming so cheap they were sold for the price of a single loaf of bread. When information costs the same as your lunch, it's no longer just a luxury for the rich, it's for everyone. This huge shift paved the way for modern education, and it brings us right to our next subject, a guy who figured out exactly how to game this brand new system.
Section 4. Erasmus, the viral scholar. Let's look at the ultimate Renaissance influencer. So this is Desiderius Erasmus of Rotterdam. Take a look at this 1526 engraving of him by Albrecht Dürer. You see him surrounded by books, pen in hand, looking like the ultimate hard-working intellectual. But here's the brilliant part.
Erasmus didn't just write best-selling books. He used the new printing press to mass distribute this exact image of himself right alongside his texts.
He was deliberately building a personal brand. He'd send his works and his portrait directly to powerful patrons all over Europe, people like King Henry VIII. By using the printing press to totally bypass the traditional gatekeepers, Erasmus essentially became the very first viral European influencer. He cemented his status as the Prince of the Humanists and made sure everyone from London to Rome was talking about him.
Section 5. Machiavelli and Thomas More. This brings us to the real political climax of our explainer.
We're looking at two humanist titans who used this new Renaissance internet in vastly different ways. This table really highlights the stark contrast between them. You have Machiavelli's ruthless realism on one side and Thomas More's tricky idealism on the other. Machiavelli wrote The Prince essentially as a super direct, brutally pragmatic job application to the powerful Medici family. Thomas More, though, was an English diplomat who couldn't really afford to be that direct, so he wrote Utopia, creating a fictional world to safely debate controversial political ideas without ever actually committing to them.
Machiavelli, on the other hand, completely stripped away the ethical sugarcoating. In The Prince, he literally argues that to survive in a cutthroat world, a ruler has to be prepared to act immorally, even ruthlessly and treacherously, ignoring religion completely if it means holding on to power. It was a shocking, purely pragmatic guide born out of intense political instability. But here is the ultimate tragedy for both of these guys. Even with their brilliant mastery of the written word, they both met really tragic ends when their ideas collided with actual Renaissance politics. Machiavelli never actually got that high-level job from the Medici, and he died in 1527 before The Prince was even printed. And More's clever ambiguity? That didn't protect him either. When his moral principles wouldn't let him endorse King Henry VIII's divorce, it led directly to his execution. They had world-class rhetoric, but politics was still a lethal game.
So I'm going to leave you with a massive question to ponder. We look back at the printing press as this neat, fixed point in history. But to the people living through it, it was a chaotic, rapid disruption of literally everything they knew. Very much like the digital revolutions we're navigating right now. What communications revolutions are quietly altering our futures today? Thank you so much for joining me in today's explainer, and always keep questioning the information around you.